Hello, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Pro and Hurricane HD video blog for Sunday, the 2nd of June 2013. A quick look at the points of origin for this 10-day time period, the first third of June, as it were, June 1st through the 10th. The Eastern Pacific typically way busier than the Atlantic Basin is, and you notice there is no activity during this first 10 days of June in the deep tropics, and that's because that area is not ready yet. That's a simple way to put it. This region in the Atlantic Basin is more climatologically favored this time of year due to warmer water temperatures overall and a slightly more favorable atmosphere. You need light winds in the upper levels and moisture in the mid-levels, instability, and most of those things are present, though not every single year do we get prolific development during this first 10 days of June in this region. Remember, this map is indicating development areas over the past at least 100 years. So you don't see that many dots overall, and certainly is not 100 of them, so you don't have that every year. This will change, of course, as we move through the season, and you'll see that this spreads across the Atlantic, all those little red dots, so that by the mid part of September, we will have quite a sea of dots out there, to be sure. All right, so what is going on? Well, we have Invest Area 90L. I believe it's still classified as 90L down here in the Northern Caribbean Sea, and that's right where the main clustering of the points of origins have been over the past 100 years, is this region. It's a low potential area, and if we look at a satellite picture, you can see why. The convection or shower and thunderstorm activity is spread out over a fairly large area. It is not very well organized. You don't see that spiral banding and turning of the clouds. It's more of just a large cluster of showers and thunderstorms. The upper level winds we'll take a look at in just a minute. They are not favorable through this region at all, and somewhat favorable down here. So that's why we are seeing this fairly persistent upward motion to the atmosphere where the clouds are able to bubble up. And this is where the disturbance is located, right here. And this is where upper level winds are more conducive for development. You can follow these wind barbs here. This is clockwise flow, or an anticyclone, in the upper parts of the atmosphere. This is 200 millibars up, way on up there near where the jets fly. Farther to the north, the disturbance is down here. Up here in the Gulf, winds are coming in one direction, basically from the west to west-southwest, and they are really hauling it, 30 knots and higher, and that is way too strong to allow something to develop. So this small area geographically down here in the Caribbean is the only cocoon of safety right now for this system to take shape, and it'll probably drift over towards the southern Gulf and may have a chance to develop some over the next few days. This is the GFS Global Forecast System, basically the surface map and previous 6-hour precipitation valid on Tuesday. So this is 48 hours out. So here we are Tuesday morning. Here is the Carolinas. Here's Florida right here. That's what I want you to see. This indicates pretty heavy rainfall, and you can see that that's streaming northeast out of the Gulf of Mexico towards the Florida Peninsula. Over the Yucatan, right here, the Yucatan Peninsula down in Mexico, we do have a weak area of low pressure, but notice the broad area of low pressure overall. If we follow these wind barbs here, they go around like this, and then they come up this way. This is counterclockwise flow down this very broad and weak area of low pressure in the northern Caribbean and over the Yucatan Peninsula. So a general spread out linear area of low pressure, like a trough at the surface, plus this weak surface low over the Yucatan will equal quite a wet time of it to come over the Florida Peninsula, at least the southern half, it looks like, in the week ahead. Here's 72 hours from last night's run of the GFS, the low pressure area holding on just north of the Yucatan. Very large, broad area of low pressure, fairly light winds. That's 10 knots right there, maybe 15 knots there. So we're not seeing some kind of a strong tropical storm or anything, but this will send these pieces of energy or convective activity shedding off and heading towards the Florida Peninsula. So you folks are going to have periods of time where you're going to get drenched, and that can be a problem, leading to localized flooding and other issues. That will be the big impact, along with just a miserable beach day from time to time because of this system. Going on out to 96 hours by Thursday, it starts to organize a little bit more, the GFS indicating a pressure down to 1,004 millibars. Winds are picking up a little bit more associated with it, maybe 20 knots or so, and still pretty weak, right? But it's going to churn up the Gulf, probably create some hazardous boating conditions, and certainly will, and send those rain showers into the peninsula. Then, interestingly enough, as we get to Friday, the GFS as well as the Euro, the ECMWF, both showing that this tries to intensify as it approaches Central Florida's west coast. So maybe Tampa up towards Cedar Key, those areas, Sarasota. That could be interesting as we get towards the end of the week, that the model's finally indicating this starts to become better organized, pressure drops. Still not really substantial, not even in the 990s, is still in the low thousands, 1,003 millibars or so is what it looks like to me there, buried in the graphic. And the winds are starting to increase, some 30-knot winds coming out of the southwest. So there could be some small storm surge issues along that very vulnerable west coast of Florida. You think about Everglades City, Naples, Venice up to Sarasota into Tampa Bay. 30 knots of steady southwest winds will pile up the water, especially with the system moving towards the area where those winds are blowing onshore. So you see that? That's the direction of movement of the storm, the system, whatever it would be at this time. And then there's your wind flow heading right towards the Florida Peninsula as well. So this will give us something to watch, with the potential that it becomes our first tropical storm of the season. Though fairly weak, it's still going to have a huge rain impact and some possible coastal impacts as we get to next weekend especially. Here is the last graphic of the presentation today. The Weather Prediction Center used to be called the Hydrometeorological Prediction Center. Weather Prediction Center is easier to say. And their QPF, or Quantitative Precipitation Forecast, for the next 3 days. What does that mean? Basically, this is the summary of the expected precip over the next 72 hours. And you can see this pretty large plume of moisture aimed right at South Florida. And it's going to be mainly those southwest counties. You think about Lee and Collier and Monroe County, and maybe even portions of Miami-Dade County near the Everglades. And it just depends on how these different convective cells and clusters set up. That can't be predicted this far out. But you see lots of blues and purples there, indicating more than 1.5 inches to 2 inches of rain plus. And that's just the next 3 days. We'll have to wait and see what happens as we get towards the middle and latter part of the upcoming week. I will address that in tomorrow's update. All right, well, that is it for now. We do have stuff to watch, and again, cannot emphasize enough that rainfall threat to South Florida for localized areas is hard to pinpoint where those will be. Could be a big problem, and then we may be looking at the possibility of a tropical depression, a tropical storm forming later in the week. I will address that on these daily updates. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with another video blog for Hurricane Pro and Hurricane HD for you tomorrow.